You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Betoota Advocate, on Desert Rock FM. Well, welcome back to the Betoota Advocate radio show, where we interview the wildest and brightest and most exciting and most storied Australians and international guests that we can get access to. We've had a big couple months, actually. We've had... Wendell, you had Dominic Perrottet on the other day.
Yeah, well, look, I was just about to say we've had a procession of royals come through, but I wouldn't count a career politician as a royal. But we've had a lot of music royalty, artistic royalty. We've had heaps of people coming through the Channel Country the last little bit. We're on the way up.
Robert Forster, followed closely by Speed, the hardcore band from
Future
Chatswood.
Royalty, Princelings.
Future Royalty. They sold $50,000 worth of merch as an opening act at the Enmore. That's a record-breaking stat. And today's guest can speak to all of those experiences and milestones.
Not $50,000 worth of merch. No, that's... Man, that would be... congratulations to Speed. That's great news.
Yeah, no, it's great when you can see... that's what we want to talk to you about today. The path you've paved...
Do you want me to be Dominic Perrottet or Robert Forster?
How do you feel about poker machines?
I hate gambling with a passion. It's made a wreck of a large element of my family, so I do.
Yeah, everyone has that story. It's funny they still exist. But yes, thank you for joining us today, Tim Rogers, solo artist in his own right, and of course, UMI, a storied and staple and stayer of Australian music. Thank you for joining us today on the Betoota Advocate podcast.
This is a pleasure, CNW.
There's I think there's theatre in there as well. There's a few acting appearances, maybe a book coming up as well.
I've got a new book I'm starting. Yeah, I released one a few years ago and just finished up a big film, actually, which frustratingly I can't talk about. Yeah. There's actually, when you do those big sort of blockbuster films, you can't talk about them. And I'm dying to talk about it because it's a great one, and working with a fantastic director and a great cast, and I can't talk about it.
Well,
How ridiculous.
That's what they say at the pub on the Friday Arbor. You get that on the big jobs.
You do get that on the... It was a big job, and working with that kind of crew, hundreds of people on crew and the money, and actually got paid for it, and I get killed within 15 minutes. And,
awesome.
But I now understand why films cost so much, because they get...
moving parts.
Well, if they're going to pay someone like me, that's...
So insurance you're talking about, yeah.
Well, we, my accountant, who may or may not be my mum, and her job for 15 years being my accountant's pretty much, she says it's keeping you out of jail, because it's always just you're above the surface. And when you mention that band selling $50,000 worth of merch, man, that'd get me out of a lot of trouble at the moment. So, making records is pretty expensive. Didn't do interviews with you guys normally get this discursive?
No.
This could go anywhere.
Musicians are interesting because they have to tell stories for a living on stage. You know what I mean? So
I wish more would.
Yeah.
I get a little disappointed when seeing other acts and their badinage is just, you guys are great, you guys rock, which may or may not be true, but my favourite musical artists have been ones that it's pretty obvious that they don't have a patter and they'll just have stories, because if you're a musician, I think, worth your salt, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit over the past few years, because my partner Alice is a former ballerina, and now she's the resident choreographer at the Australian Ballet, and with ballet, because I'm quite close to a lot of her former dance partners and within that administration, and you will go somewhere and set yourself up for 2 months and do whatever town it is overseas. Residencies. And as a musician, you each night you're somewhere else, unless you're successful, and you do successive nights somewhere else. So, and you pick up a lot of stories along the way, and often they're not your own, but then you just grab them and you turn them into your own, and that's your in-between song banter right there.
Yeah, and please tell me, be honest here, have you ever walked on stage and fucked up so badly that maybe you were in Belfast and you said, "Hello, Dublin"? Or have you done anything like that? Tell us.
Hey, you do not make that mistake.
I know that one's the one you don't mistake.
I try not to...
We've done it, by the way. We did a live show and we walked on stage in Toowoomba and said, "Hello, Townsville."
Again,
but luckily
mistake.
because it's Betoota Advocate, they thought that was the first joke. So okay, let's keep moving.
Pretty good gag to open with.
I'm not going to try that same mistake. And two towns that I love very dearly, and so I won't make that mistake. But yeah, said mistakes like that. That's not the worst mistake I've made on stage, getting a name wrong. But some of those towns playing in Ireland and this such a beautiful country and wonderful to travel around, but you get told pretty quickly where you can't be. And it'll often just be not the troubles, but just with families. So, have you been to Limerick?
Yeah. You got feuds and all that kind of stuff.
Limerick is one of the, and I just thought, wow, we're playing Limerick again, and I love that town and this club we play there. And I was there by myself, and my friend, the promoter, just let me know, you don't walk out of here and turn right. You know, turn left when you get out. I mean, it's a pretty wonderful way of seeing the world. I haven't really travelled apart from
music.
Apart from work, and I don't think it's going to happen really. And but I've been lucky enough to tour a lot, and it's a pretty interesting way of seeing the world, because it might be said, well, all you see is the inside of pubs, and which is pretty true, but you have to form very intimate relationships and trusting relationships with people very quickly, because you're trying to put on a show. And then you're just trying to get somewhere and find a bit of floor to sleep on. And so it gets pretty intimate pretty quickly.
Speaking of travel, you come from, I wouldn't say the old school, but you come from an era, like at least you cut your teeth in an era when you would do that here. Bands nowadays don't do the Night Train in Broken Hill. And I'm sure you have many times. And I'm sure they still talk about it in Broken Hill, about when you and Mike came to the Night Train.
We talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The circuit isn't there, and we'd be doing 7 nights a week, and that was a wonderful experience. But it's just not there anymore. And
why isn't it there? Because I think the kids are still there.
The kids are still there. I live in a country town, and if bands came through, it would be incredible. The vicissitudes of running a venue are unknown to me, but it would seem, I think, just that running music venues became very difficult, and running venues without music is financially easier.
Yeah. Running venues with artificial music and flashing lights and machines that go ding.
It's cheaper.
Much easier, much cheaper.
If you run a venue, and there are venues around in smaller towns, but it's graft for them, and they've got to love it.
Yeah.
There's winery circuits that you can do. If you're kind of a level more popular than I am, you could pretty much do them all year almost.
I mean, even Bruce does the Hunter Valley. Springsteen, when he comes to town, he'll do the wineries. Yeah.
Well, I guess at a particular stage, folks worked out that you needed to almost do sponsorship deals and get tour support. So that circuit thing, because you'd run into each other acts and crew at petrol stations, and now it's at airports and airports. I hate airports, but they should be fun, because there's often you can get into the lounge and when I walk in there and I see young performers, and because I like to think I still keep an eye on what's going on, and if they're hunched over laptops and headphones, I think, no, come on, let's
let's go punch a durry next to the Bowser.
I could not have put that better myself.
Is it part of audience building that it's not necessary to go out to these smaller venues and locations as well now? With the way music is, you build a presence online, you build an audience, and they'll come to you in major cities?
I think you've just hit it, disappointingly so. I think if you're part of a scene, a particular form of music, if it's metal in particular, or punk, or hardcore, you can do that, and because you're part of a scene, and that's important. But if you're kind of in this pop rock genre, like a band like you and I are, it's that's right. And forming presence online is a complete bore, and I'm being asked to do it at the moment, and doing it because you want to get your music out there and cover some bills and get people to your show. It's It's a bit of a drag, honestly, and I just wish that for younger performers in particular, that there wasn't this, they didn't feel a need to constantly be putting out content.
Yeah, well, that's how they get themselves into trouble too, because
Really?
You can't be saying, you can't be putting yourself out there non-stop without eventually getting it wrong. You know what I mean? If it's a branding exercise.
Well, also it's...
Qantas can do it, you can do it.
I just like there's a bit of, with artists, that there's a bit of mystery. And when... It was even, had to set up a Twitter account, and I follow about maybe 20 people and some authors. I think Tom Robbins has, who's one of my favourites, has an account, or Martin Flanagan has an account. And they're good, they're great, and funny, but just every day being asked to, where are you now? I like to think that particularly music performers or authors or poets that I love come from outer space, and that after their work's done, they get in the spaceship and go off and live on their own planet.
Yeah.
But it's just, as you intimated, it's just not the way of things at the moment. You need to kind of get out there and press the flesh.
So take us back to the start. You lived in every town you could possibly live in, effectively south of Mount Isa. Were you an army brat growing up?
No, mining.
Mining, okay.
Yeah. Mum's an accountant. Dad was FIFO.
Mum wasn't then. No, Dad wasn't FIFO. Dad was an engineer on trams and trains in Melbourne, and then somehow got an offer of a job out in Kalgoorlie in mining. And he didn't do a lot underground after we moved there. He was in kind of administration and in machinery. And then he moved on to road machinery, and so that's why I started moving around.
Yeah, right.
Really, we were going to move to Groot Island actually.
Yeah.
That was really exciting for us as kids, because I was in Kalgoorlie till I was 7, and we went to Perth till I was 10, and then this offer came up for Dad to work in Groot. And looking back now, I mean, mining, you know, it's an interesting industry. There's harsh stories as well as some good ones, and I even noticed that Dad had a bit of an ambivalence towards it subsequently. But he was young, and it was a job, and
it hadn't been politicised. It certainly hadn't been a boom in Australia with mining at that point. It was a fringe kind of job.
Yeah, well, I guess that we went to Cal in '69 because there was a nickel boom, but not of the sort that have been storied since then, particularly out that way. It was just that was the thing to mine at that time. So that was kind of what...
Yeah, this is before the Ginas and Twiggies. This is a different era.
I think so. You know, I think I've been in the company of those people. It's again, being associated through my wife with the ballet and then
of course,
music.
Yes.
You find yourself at situations where you're amongst super wealthy people.
The ballet.
And it's just... very dear friends of ours who are Alice's patrons are wealthy and very interesting people, and again, you just get thrown in these situations. I guess that the impression is that someone who, like me, and particularly looks like me, must think that we'll just hang out with, hey, Bernard Fanning came over the other day, and then Paul Kelly dropped by, and then it was Casey came and we played a game of cricket, but just all walks, you just meet them all, and as you must hear, as you said, with this show, there's a lot of lives out there. And
do you find yourself looking back at your career? Right, I want to talk about your partner as a ballerina. Do you think that maybe you complained a bit too much when you look at what they go through?
Oh yeah. No, I was a complete whinger, and when get asked about the 90s, mate, the 90s, and my ritual response is to go, it wasn't my favourite time of my life, and I guess it could be something, but why? I mean, it was the most successful time of your life, and you had a bit of money, and there was lots of free stuff got thrown at you, and you got to tour 300 nights a year, but I just didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. And also at that time, because we were signed to labels in the States, Warner Brothers over there, and in Europe as well, and it was all about the next thing and becoming bigger. And well, if you've had a number one record in Australia, surely you can have one in a successful record in the States. And that's just, if you're not a business kind of person, it just takes you away from what you should be concentrating on, which is your performance and your writing, and also looking after those around you. And I don't think I ate in 7 years, and so it was just on living on piss and whatever, you know, drugs you could get your hands on, and so that's not conducive to good relationships and to long-term happiness.
But do you still reckon a ballerina gets whipped harder?
Oh, the dance world is is
I
brutal.
think about them.
Alice's stories
Just their
is
toes
nuts.
in general.
Her feet have only just now recovered, and that's good-looking feet right there. But when I first knew her 12 years ago, and she was touring far more than I was, and it was brutal, and the injuries and what happens. And so her new production is for the 60th anniversary of the Australian Ballet, and she's bringing back retired dancers to dance in this new production, and their stories are nuts. So before there was an awareness of just the proper protocols, not only around injuries but around misconduct, just weren't there. Yeah. Even when Alice started out, now it's better, but still it's brutal. Yeah. And so going to those rehearsals, I've got nothing to complain about. You know, flying through a bloody storm in Sydney last night and having to wake up early and, oh, geez. That's...
You got 10 healthy toes.
You would presume.
There's a couple that
I
are a
won't
bit
take
out
my
of whack.
shoes off.
Yeah. Fair.
No, I play a lot of footy still, and so I got broken. I mean, what idiot who's a guitarist and a singer still plays competitive cricket and footy, and I do.
Cricket's the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good
well,
way to fuck
I play with
twisty fingers.
Taradale, my local team, and all sorts of crap goes on. And I got bounced by a kid, this punk from he was out near Bendigo the other day a couple of times, and after the game, I bought him beer, and I'm 53, and he was 18, and I said, dude, I need to play shows this week. And he kind of looked at me like, I do not give a damn about that. You know, just hand over the Carlton draft.
He'll be talking about those bouncers for years and years and years.
No, he will once it sinks in. Once it sinks in how rude he was to one of his favourite musicians, maybe.
Oh, no, he didn't give a toss. He just saw me as an old man. And it's interesting, again, just that with that different walks of life, you know, when playing in competitive sports teams and playing against these young kids who just don't give a toss about you. You're an old man in their way. And thankfully I'm a medium-pace bowler as well, so I can give them a little bit of a touch-up. But I look at kids and they go, I don't want to bounce them or you know, and after if I get someone out and I'll go and give them a, you know, pat on the back and go, good playing against you, you know. I've turned quite genial in my autumnal years.
It's tricky, isn't it, with the kids as well? Like I had a 12, 13-year-old at touch footy the other day, mouthing me off, threw the ball at me on turnovers.
They're complete little snipers,
and I'm like,
aren't they?
what do I do to this 12-year-old kid who is,
Humiliate
if he
him.
was 6 years older, I'd be, you know.
And he's faster than you. So you can't catch
Well, he can certainly move in different directions a lot quicker than I can.
It's all about angles as you get older, you know.
All about angles.
It's all about those knees.
You would have had a significant break between competitive sports, I imagine, with all the touring. When did you pick it back up?
I never played anything at any great level, unfortunately, because I think I could blame it on moving around a lot. But at the time when I was probably playing some pretty good footy and cricket, we moved to northwestern Sydney, and there wasn't a good footy comp going on then like there is now. And it was probably 15 years, and then it was through getting asked to play in charity games in Melbourne. It's the link with sports and music in Melbourne is really strong. Yeah. And it is up here. There's a good community footy scene going on up here.
Is this like the
Community Cup?
Community Cup.
Yeah, RecLink stuff.
Yeah, RecLink.
Adam Yee and a bunch of other folks who run that up in Sydney are doing a great job with that. I'm not really associated with it anymore. I think my time's kind of done. But even just playing at a district level's great. And after games, I always like to make sure there's a little PA set up and playing good records and just trying to get that link together.
Yeah, the social side of it.
It's any opportunity really for meet folks outside your different circle and there's still some really shy humans out there who probably only really communicate through social media, maybe with their neighbours and with their families. And I'd like those situations either at shows or at games where you meet people from all different walks of life.
While we're on footy, I wanted to ask, you were the leader of the Resistance at a certain point in time. For our Queensland listeners, the North Melbourne Kangaroos, been prolonged pushes for a long period of time to relocate the North Melbourne Kangaroos. There's push for the Gold Coast. Lots of chat now about moving them down to Tasmania as well, potentially. How much of a role do you still have in the Resistance?
Just as a fan, really. Where that all started, I didn't start that whole thing. It was another supporters group that did, and I'd just go to a lot of games. I like going to watch games, and some of the funniest comedy I've ever heard has been at footy games, baseball games too. But what I resented was that we were being told as a club, well, you haven't got enough. You haven't got enough supporters. You haven't got enough money. And it just felt like bullying to me. And I just really detest that if you're not the biggest, then you can't be the best feeling, or you're not worthy. I thought there was something nasty and quite unethical, un-Australian, whatever it is about that. Because, we're not as big a club as some of the others, but that doesn't mean that we're not worthy. And even if we have a low supporter base, there's people who need that tangible experience of going to see their team train in Melbourne and to go to games and to be with their social circle. It kind of broke my heart that we were being told you're not big enough. Gold Coast is where the money is. And I felt, again, just tying it back with music, we know with UMI, with the Hard-Ons, with myself and the twin set, whatever configuration we're in, we know we're not the biggest, but it doesn't mean that we're not worthy. And so that's where the whole resistance thing came from. And the current president of North Melbourne, and hopefully she will be for the next 50 years, Dr. Sonia Hood, I met her through that. And now she's the president of the footy club and doing a magnificent job.
They're in a good spot.
We'll wait till round 10 to make that appraisal. It's, because I'm not a realist.
Rebuilding.
Yeah.
Rebuild. Oh, man, I hate that word.
It's 5-year plan, 10-year plan.
You and I have been rebuilding since 1998. We'll get there one day. Come on.
But that said, you do see these moments. You see it with towns, you hear towns that get written off. That place is fucked. That place is just a town as a whole, and they they prove everyone wrong eventually. One I would say is Wellington, New South Wales, next to Dubbo, always written off as a ice town but now they've actually starting to hit their straps and they're proving everyone wrong.
What's going on there?
Just it was a town that was kind of the butt of the joke in rural New South Wales.
Yep.
Little Antarctica.
Little Antarctica, they call it. Little Antarctica. Yeah.
Did it take over from Lithgow as far as just copping it?
Prison towns.
When we were young, Lithgow used to cop it.
Yeah.
Until you go out there, my dad used to work out there a bit, and Singleton, and until you go out there and you meet half a dozen of the best people you've ever met in your life. But
there's always a great pub in any of these wild towns, but it's the prison towns cop it.
Yes.
And Wellington's one of them. But they've had a rebirth, and I look at other institutions and places that have done that. South Sydney Rabbitohs is a perfect example. Were kicked out of the comp, and they all fought tooth and nail, and then they, under Russell's tutelage, won a premiership, nearly won one last year. Yeah, I don't think... You see this, you do see it, and it's actually really interesting nowadays with seeing a renaissance in types of music, particularly with these different social medias. Kate Bush has been the funniest thing I've seen. Kids thinking she's a millennial artist because of Stranger Things or because of TikTok,
The Fleetwood Mac on the skateboard drinking the cranberry juice was a big trend.
My favourite of those stories happened, it was 20-something, or maybe 30 years ago, and probably my favourite performer in the world, Nick Lowe, of Rockpile, and he's a producer, and he's a gentleman. He's maybe in his early 70s now, but he wrote a song called "What's So Funny About Peace, Love and Understanding," which Elvis Costello covered first. And Nick Lowe, his nickname's the Basher because of his playing style, but he was not a shit kicker, but just a working musician.
Journeyman.
Yeah. Thank you. But What's So Funny About Peace, Love and Understanding got covered by a guy called Curtis Stigers for the soundtrack to the film The Bodyguard, which sold squillions. And so Nick Lowe, who was living a humble but good life and always working and always writing great songs, became a millionaire overnight. And he said, I became a millionaire overnight, and you know what? It's really great. And so I've been hoping, I get the call from Harry Styles, manager, and it says, "Hello, Tim. It's Nelly. I'm Harry Styles' manager. He wants to do a cover of Heavy Heart." I go, "Take it, run with it, Haz. Go for it." But the Kate one's a great story. I mean, if there are kids who haven't heard her music before, and really the way KB has run her whole music career, because she is so heavy into production, and when she doesn't want to tour, she doesn't for years. She wanted to be with her son Birdie, I think his name is, when she grew up. So she went off the road for 20 years. and just didn't feel the pressure to go out and sell. And then through a TV show and sells a million records.
Every kid thinks they've discovered it. Yeah, it's like every kid thinks they've discovered Kate Bush, or Kate Bush is an emerging, which is where you want to be. I always said that to the Violent Soho guys. Every time you hear their music or you see them at a band, it's like it's the first time they've played, because it's a fairly timeless kind of sound they have.
I got to know them through Luke, their bass player, did some photography for me for a record a couple of years ago, and he said to me that I went to a Soho gig at the Annandale, and it was maybe a couple of years after they'd started, but they were playing in the front row of the Annandale, and apparently they'd noticed my disinterest, which wasn't actually the case. I was probably just loaded. But then when I became this complete slavish fan, just like everyone else, anyway, seeing them, it was like the first time they were playing, that enthusiasm, and I found that really, really invigorating.
Yeah.
And still do. I mean, hanging around this band, Clowns, Melbourne punk kind of hardcore band, and every time I hang around them, it makes me want to just go and try harder. Or we played with the band Glitterous in Canberra with the Hard-Ons the other month. And
Hard-Ons and Glitterous.
Well, they're four of the most interesting women you'll meet. Just the way that their whole approach to music is militant is probably the wrong word, but they have such an objective and righteous way of doing it. And I guess with playing in the Hard-Ons, our only kind of dictum is that you're good to people and you want to play the best show and the hardest show ever. So it's not incompatible with the Bamboos or with the Hard-Ons, with UMI or with Twin Set, that we've come to this point where we actually just want to see people enjoy.
Yeah.
Do
you find there's parcels of like there's actually a forensic journalist, investigative reporter now, but he was a music journalist for years, Mahmoud Fazal. He lives out near you. He's in Dalesborough, I think. And he said, he perfectly articulated Tasmania to me. He said, it feels like the last place that hasn't got the internet, but they have it. You know what I mean? They're completely in their own thing, and it was perfect. I went down there to Launceston the other day, and I was just in a pub, and I fucking stumbled. It felt like it was the 90s. I walked into a room, and I was in the 90s, and there was a band playing. What were they called? I'll shout them out now because I was having a good time. Dirty Motel. That was their name.
Dirty. I know the Dirty Motel. It's actually in Wollongong. We were in. I was with Alice in Triabunna, which is about 100 miles out of Hobart on the east coast, because we were doing a ballet out there, working on a ballet. And it's similarly, what can it felt like, okay, we're still in the Wild West, whatever it is. And it was fascinating and great.
Yeah.
And
but you can walk in and you feel like you've got a local band playing in the local pub in front of their local fans, and you feel like, is this how they felt when they discovered Killing Heidi is in Adelaide? Is this how they felt when they saw these kids? So some people are still doing it. They're gigging in town every night.
Oh, it happens. I got asked recently, what are you most looking forward to this year? And I said, it's the gig I don't know about yet. And I think the suggestion was, come on, push something that's coming up. And I said, I'm going to be in Lonnie one night and walk into a pub and there's Dirty Hotel playing. And they've got their own scene going on. And what's there's a band, Stiff Richards, who I saw when I was still living in St Kilda. It was maybe 2018, and they were playing at my local pub called Misery Guts in St Kilda. Stiff Richards, and they were and still are one of the four greatest rock bands I've ever seen in my life. And I just happened upon them. I walked in after a cricket game, I think, with my best mate Mick, and there were the Stiff Richards, and that stuff still happens, But I guess it just takes people taking a punt on things.
Or just walking into the place, have a night out.
It's not going to happen every night, but to take a punt on things is how it does happen. And they can become your band, which is kind of special. I mean, finding something that you love that millions of people are into is one feeling, but finding something that you feel that you've become part of. I got chatting with an old friend of mine, Pete Danks, Sydney boy, who wrote to me just the other day and said, I'm listening to your first EP and it still gives me great feelings about how we used to hang around, in dingy pubs in Western Sydney in the early 90s. And I thought, I liked that memory. That was good, and he took a punt on us. I think it was probably at the Hopetown don't look for kids. It's not silly. That's not going to happen again, is it? No. Damn, what a pub that was.
It was on the corner there at Burke Street.
That's right.
Yeah. You know what's going on there? It is a Mexican standoff between three old stubborn brothers that own it, and
wow,
one wants to operate it, one wants it to fall apart, one wants to sell it. So you can't really put that one on the council, unfortunately.
There's a concept record we could write about that. You've got just the guy.
Yes, secession. You sound like you are a patron of bands coming through, which, as I said, ballet has the patrons, the arts, painters have patrons. Musicians don't often have the tap on the shoulder, saying, keep it up, good work, or come on the road with us. Or tell me about, though, when you guys were in that moment you were talking about earlier when, you were making music and you were household names in Australia and, record labels were telling you America's next. But you had Australia, you feel, under your arm, and you could play any night. You always said 300 nights a year. Was there a camaraderie in the scene, or were you guys very much yourselves? Were you?
Oh, it was definitely a camaraderie.
Yeah.
I guess we were touring mostly with a lot of Powderfinger shows. They supported us probably 50 times, and they were very dear friends and still are. And seeing their rise, any band that's really become big in the past 30 years has supported us at one stage of a particular genre. In that, there was great camaraderie. Remember Paul Dempsey of Something for Kate breaking a rib of mine, playing footy in Perth. When we go to rock and roll high school in Melbourne, and particularly meeting young women out there, Sourpuss, and meeting Brody, who then formed the Distillers in the States, and Magic Dirt, watching their ascendancy was so genuinely exciting, and meeting Adelita for the first time, it was good camaraderie, and I almost said competitiveness, because I'm sure there was that going on. I think when it was pretty obvious that we were going on the downward slope, and acts like Jet in particular, the Vines, I don't think we played with Jet much, if at all, but they were friends. We used to just hang out and get into trouble together. But those bands coming through, but when we knew that we were kind of on the downward slope, and that felt a little odd. And my priorities were different because my daughter had just been born. I was really trying to be a good husband at the time and a father, and so there was a bit of conflict there. But I knew that I didn't have the stamina to try and keep up with or in any way be competitive. That competitive stuff, I remember the first time we went to the States in 92, 93, and every band we ran into wanted to ask us about who are you signed with and who's your agent. And first time I ran into Marilyn Manson for the first time, it was in Atlanta, Georgia, 94. We were on the Soundgarden tour, and there's this part of Atlanta, Georgia called Little Five Points, and I was walking with Russ and Andy, and we were just looking for a bar, and up the road comes Scary People, whoa! and this dude with who looks like Marilyn Manson, and comes and says, "Hey, you're who am I?" And I said, "Yes, Scary Man. Can we go into this bar out of the light? You're scaring me." And he wanted to know who's your agent, who's good in Australia, and went straight into the business
even
talk.
This goth who's talking establishment kind of shit.
It was all business, and so we need to make some decisions about looking after things, but we just know that we're not those kind of people. Yeah. Now, when we got to Europe for the first 20 tours, and particularly England, and everyone we played with just wanted to, for lack of a better term, party.
Yeah.
And it was just all about, let's just fucking get absolutely wankered.
Yeah.
And there was not as much talk about
a few Gallaghers and that kind of crowd. Or was it
smaller acts than that.
What was the loosest kind of scene you were in over there? Was it the?
I was just at pub scenes around Britain. By the time we met up with Oasis, they were already so huge. The first time we met them was at the Budokan Theatre in Japan. We did 4 nights there, and when we first met Liam and Noel, and they said, "Look, we've got to get one thing fucking straight, right? Anything you fucking need, you just come and fucking ask." And I said, "Oh, g'day," because they asked us to do the tour, and they were the sweetest, funniest, and that was loose, like so loose, but because it had an extra element that there were thousands of people outside the hotel each night in Japan or in Hong Kong or then in Australia.
On top of it all.
Yeah, which was, seeing that from afar was great because you wind up in someone's hotel room, and Giggsy, the bass player at the time, was so into reggae and dub music because that's what he grew up with in the suburbs of Manchester, and it would all be about that, getting to Giggsy's room at 4 a.m. And so even amongst that mayhem, it was all about you just want to end up with your mates and not people who just want to hang out unless they had something to drop off.
If
and then
that time was happening now, do you think there might have been a few more headlines written about you and UMI? It seemed like a pretty controversy-free
You can't
career.
bugger up much. Yeah, I mean, it took Liam to headbutt someone for that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if...
the all or nothing's a bit harder to pull off nowadays.
Yeah, and you just... I know we probably didn't act all that politely or friendly to everyone, and we would have been called out. I don't think there was anything particularly nefarious, but I'm sure we were rude to people at times, and we would have been called out as we should have.
Well, you don't necessarily have to do anything nefarious now to...
But also, you don't. You see that with, like... I see a group of 5 blokes, they're probably all plumbers and accountants, and they're pissed walking down the street, and they're not pleasant to be around. So imagine like... imagine running into a group of blokes that you know of and they're acting like that. Then that's even more offensive, you know?
Yeah, look, the hairiest situations I've been into the past couple of years have been with either the footy team or cricket team and people just getting loose. But because... And I think because of my physicality, because I'm sort of 6'3", big nose and all that kind of thing, and you get attention, but it's after work crowds, and it's people my age, men, women, otherwise, at shows who are the worst. Whether it's solo shows or twin set shows. But then what we need to talk about, rather than sometimes you just want to get people thrown out of a building and think, who knows what's going on in their life?
Yeah, for sure.
There may be a nurse who's just had the worst week and they just want to get loose. Yeah. And so you're just trying to navigate it in a way, if they're not listening and they want to jump on stage and grab your microphone, just let's get you off the stage. And if someone's acting loose later on, you just got to pull them apart and say, hey, what's going on?
Especially a rock show where it's like, we know that this is a pressure valve. We know that this is what you're here for. Yeah. It's not like a comedy show where it's so much more tense and someone's saying, I can understand a comedian asking for that person to be taken out because it's such a crucial kind of art form that they're trying to navigate here. And
that's a very good point.
And you can derail them with
and it can turn into a very uncomfortable sledging match, which is like everyone's like, no, I just wanted to come.
But like a rock show, someone's on stage. I get it. She's fucked up. Yeah, as you said, she's probably a nurse. She's a frontline worker. She's just had a few too many shardies. Like,
do whatever you want. Yeah, but with comedy, I guess because it's so much about timing.
Yeah.
That for hecklers at comedy shows, people, come on, just let this thing gestate. You don't know where this is going. Remind me of that when I heckle at the next comedy show I go to.
There's a great one that Cam James, is a comedian, tells about. He's a Newcastle boy and he grew up obviously madly in love with Silverchair. And one time he was playing up in Hi-Fi and doing a gig and he looked out the back and it was Daniel Johns was there and he heckled him and said, "Tell a joke," and he yelled out, "Play freak." Yelled that back to
oh dear, Daniel.
It was a good sledge. He ended up getting that.
You know, with that you were saying with the scrutiny and I guess social media, but I got a call from Daniel. It was 2 years ago, and I hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, I guess, and got this call and he said, "Hey Timmy, it's Dan. How you doing?" And I was I'd had a couple, and he had as well. And so we're talking, but after an hour, I thought, I don't know if this is a prank, and so after all, I hung up and I called Chris from the chair. I said, "Hey, is this Daniel's number?" And he went, "Yeah, what's up?" And I said, "I can't believe it. Daniel it was a fantastic chat and very emotional, but I thought, this could be a prank. This is kind of the era that we live in about trying to set up people. Oh, let's make fun of old Timmy Rogers by pranking." And so I called Dan back and we chatted for a couple of hours and it was great. But I just hated that I had to check that.
Yeah, well, that is funny when everything's documented and everything's... well, we can blame Ashton Kutcher for that. Punked. Yeah, that was his TV.
That's right. Yeah. I've never felt to blame Ashton for anything yet, but here we are.
Blame him for Twitter as well. He was an early investor.
Now, on the controversies, can we ask you about Mark Holden at the Adelaide airport all those years ago?
Please.
Yeah, we were playing Adelaide somewhere and we were trying to score drugs. So the best we'd come up with was some kind of downer that we just crushed up and went forward. Davey and I, not the rest of the gentlemen, we were being pretty stupid. So we turned up at the airport and just trying to find a bar that was open, and we did. Kept drinking. If you fight off downers, then you get this odd little high from it. And anyway, we were feeling pretty fruity, and Mark walked by with his crew and just kind of sneered at me, and I said something like, bugger off, and he kind of went at me and said, what, are you trying to get a headline? And I said, I don't need you to get a flipping headline. And so we just had a little bit of a pushing match, and then whoever our tour manager was at the time said, come on, let's get to the lounge. And so I went to the lounge, and Mark and his crew were there, and we're just kind of having goes at each other from across the room. And so the flight attendants came over and said, Mr. Rogers, you're not allowed to get on the plane. And I said, well, if I'm not allowed to get on the plane, either's that drop punt over there, and pointed to Mark. And so we both got on the plane, but I thought on planes you're in a enclosed space, so we kept it quiet. Anyway, then it made a minor headline. But Mark and I have met up subsequently. We saw each other at a bar, and I think we've done some charity things together, and we come from different places,
ends of the industry,
but we both studied law, and so that's what we talk about when we see each other. But
share a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole thing that I blamed him for being on The Voice and made a big deal of it, that's just not true.
So that it was pitched as you were you were anti-reality rock stars. Is that
it's not my thing, but no, it wasn't. It was I thought he was being smarmy and I was being a drunk twit. No, because that level of entertainment, I don't know, I don't really like the way it goes about it, because it's not allowing people to make mistakes, and maybe there's a bit of jealousy with the way that I sing. But I know some good people who worked on that show. Meg Washington worked on that show in the first series, and some other people I admire a lot. So no, but
not for me.
Mark and I are fine. He goes to a restaurant that I love in St Kilda. I like seeing him because we don't talk about fights in airports. He's a human. I'm half human. We can get along.
It was just a moment.
So
it was quite a moment, though. I tell you, that was a whole day getting told by officials, we cannot let you on this plane. But I'm glad I still had the wherewithal to go, well, if I'm not,
he's not coming either.
Yep.
That's law.
How far did you get through the law degree?
I got through
second year?
4 years.
Oh, so pretty much all of it.
Yeah, I had a nervous breakdown after 3 years. I think it was 3. And so at the ANU in Canberra, and so I tried to start up again at Uni of New South Wales and Sydney Uni and Sydney Uni, I think, and Macquarie. But I was toast by then. I was so heavily medicated I couldn't concentrate, and it wasn't my thing. I was really just scraping through on the legal side. I loved the art side of studying literature and poetry, and that was fun. I'd love to go back one day, but I wouldn't do law again.
Yeah, fair enough. One thing I did want to ask you about is you've been quite open and upfront about mental health struggles, and you just mentioned there you had the breakdown. A long time before it became less stigmatised. Yeah, before people...
a merchandise opportunity.
There's a merchandise opportunity? No, I'm jumping on that.
There's plenty of men's mental health awareness groups and whatever now. It's all...
And a lot of them doing great work, and it's become a much larger thing and it's much more spoken about. But you were speaking about that stuff and you were quite open about it a little while ago, like before it was more
back when we thought it was satanic.
Yeah. What was the...
Well, it quite possibly is. The only reason I talked about it was that what helped me, apart from a process of medication and working on it, and it can kick my ass at any stage, so hopefully not today. That's my only thought. But I talked about it because at that time I didn't know what anxiety was. I got diagnosed as being schizophrenic, and that felt at the time like a death sentence. And so I went on all the meds, and it was before the band started, and just thought, that's my life over, and this is the way it is now.
That was before the band.
Yeah, well, I think the band had started, But I got that diagnosis from a psychiatrist it was in northern Sydney, I think, and it was kind of dire, and so it was just this year of being very heavy meds, and then through a bit of therapy, talking about it, I went off the meds far too quickly, cold turkey, which probably was a very bad idea, and the band, I had to go out and play and to get on stage and confront some things, because what I'd had was probably an anxiety disorder and very obsessive compulsive behaviour, and had to work on that by touring, and a lot of very confronting situations and odd reactions to things. That when I got to talk to other people who'd experienced the levels of anxiety that I was having, it all made sense. It didn't make the attacks any better, but I realised what was going on.
Yeah, right.
And where
you could contextualise
it, but also I found out a little too late what gets me into that situation. I think if you're an anxious person and are having attacks, getting on the blow and staying up for 5 nights is not a good idea. And so that's the only reason I talked about it. Look, honestly, it was not to try and get a vote or to get any sympathy, because it was.
Well, it was before that. It was well before you could get any cultural capital out of talking out about it.
People didn't speak
and
about
it. And it's come a long way since. I look at footballers now. I mean, he's retired now, but Jamal Idris was diagnosed. And every time he'd score a try, he'd do this next to his head, and he'd do the crazy hand sign, which was it was great for people to see.
Well, Wayne Schwass, ex North Melbourne and Sydney Swans player, and easily one of the 3 toughest players I've ever seen. And he's got an organisation, Puck Up, which is very similarly. And when you look at footage of him playing and winning premierships with North, and he said it was torture. And that's a very difficult situation. I do worry that it can get used as an excuse if people bugger up and say, hey, look, I'm struggling. Well, we're all struggling.
It's actually in the playbook now for an apology. It's
the first time you hear about it after an incident a couple of nights ago.
That's dangerous, because there are definitely different levels. It's like with a lot of habits that I have and behaviours, you never know quite where on the scale you are. So, I've gone and talk to someone, and professionals can really help. I mean, there's one thing talking to your friends, and acquaintances and family, which is desperately important. But I think, there are professionals out there who are amazing as well. So,
and even starting with a GP,
Where
do I go from here? And that's I guess that's the one door after your mates, right? You go, all right, they know about it, but let's talk to a pro.
I do think so. And you may have to try a number of different people until you can find out what's working for you. And to, let stuff about trying meditation, and probably don't delve straight into the drugs unless you talk to a professional and they think that you need a circuit breaker. Yeah. I had to go back on some medication a couple of years ago because it was at the point where I actually couldn't have a break. Yeah. And I felt like I couldn't because I was back touring again. And there's a pressure at the moment with particularly being anything that it's not been a good couple of years, and so you're encouraged to just take any work you can. Yeah. And I was just running myself a bit ragged, and I went back on the meds.
Especially after those lockdowns, and especially coming out of Victoria. There was a lot of people, they didn't say no to one thing for a year, whether it was socially or whether it was work-wise. Do you feel, we want to talk about what you work on now. Mm-hmm. Do you feel coming out of the pandemic was a great time to reassess? I feel for a lot of creatives, that's what we're learning in our interviews. You're able to look at everything and reassess or at least map a way forward. You've spoken about, you've figured out your mental health, you figured out, albeit too late, but you figured out how to make it, you can figure out your circuit breakers and you can figure out your way forward. And touring back to front. What is it like now? Do you feel like you're a well-oiled machine or?
No. I still have shows that are really not great. Had a couple at the end of the last year because I was pretty burnt out. Whichever act I'm with, there's not a great safety net there. Even such things, there's no backing tapes. Right. So many acts use backing tapes these days, but with the Twin Set at the moment, it's a folk rock band. Anything can go wrong at any time. And if you're only giving 70%, you get shown up at the level of musicianship. Hard On's exactly the same. And you and I played a show the other night where Davey and I knew that we had a twin set show on a Friday, and then we had a big old night, and then backed it up with the UMI show. And at a particular point we said, okay, we've actually got to focus here, because we turned up at Frankston in Victoria and there were thousands of people there, and it was an all ages show. And we thought, okay, there are kids here, we've got to kind of reassess this. And it meant that we just dug in and played a really, really good rock and roll show. But yeah, there's not a safety net there, and there's nothing worse other than bereavement and broken hearts. That after playing a bad show, it's you're kind of inconsolable, and
it's a sting.
How long does it eat away? Does it eat away at you for days? And
until
days,
you play a good show?
Right.
Which is the great part about touring, is that you get a chance to redeem yourself. But until that next show is awful. Yeah. Because you know when a show's happening and it's not going well, and you're just trying to turn it around and you just can't. And whether it's gear or your own performance, or you've got to,
is there such thing as a bad crowd? Do you think?
Oh well, yes, there is. And
because, like, as I said, the comedians believe in that theory, like shit crowd tonight. But
it's always because, I was talking to Charlie Pickering about this the other day, actually, that you've got to try and remember there's someone at the back of the room who's not heckling you, who's not the loudest person, who's not up the front, who really needs it tonight. Yeah. Maybe it's one in the 50 people that are there. And it's hard to remember sometimes that particularly if you're doing a spoken word gig and all you can hear is this crap at the front and people shouting out. And
you can't spit the dummy at the whole crowd.
You can't spit the dummy at the whole crowd. I definitely have. And do really regret it. So I've got to remember that now there's someone in the room somewhere who really needs this tonight. Yeah. So you'd concentrate on them.
It's a night out. Yeah.
We did a Hard On show in the Bowen Club in Geelong, and Bowen's just got such a wonderful history, and it's a great rock and roll club. But I turned up, I was the new singer, and I just knew we were going to cop it, because Geelong's a rock and roll town, Detroit. And
the motor town there, right?
So I went on in gold boots and tidy little gold shorts, and I thought, I'm just going to go ponce it out. And the front row wanted to kill me. But after 4 songs, I've just kept my head down, looking to Ray, Blackie, to Murray, and thinking, oh, well, if we're going to go out, we might as well go out. And after 4 songs, these dudes at the front who wanted to kill me just didn't know what to do. So I think they just moved towards the back. And we just had to concentrate on the people who really wanted to dance and enjoy it.
Get out the front. They're sitting there glaring at you.
Oh, yeah. And
just go to the pub and find a fight in the pub.
There's no barrier at the Bowen. And... and there in my little gold shorts and gold boots. Well, yeah, if you're going to go out, this is one way.
So what's on the cards this year? We got
this new twin set record is out, and we're kind of ecstatic about it, and feel as a project that's been from go to woe, well thought out and passionate and fun. And so we're touring with the twin set for the next couple of months. Then go to Europe with the Hard Ons, and we release a new Hard Ons record. And then we're going to get stuck into a You and My record, which we've started writing. So the year's looking busy, and there's a potential theatre project as well coming up. Right. But I want to get to work on this book. It's a book about reading and what reading can do for cognition and moods, and how it can help with addiction as well through what you're reading, and particularly reading fiction.
Yeah, right.
And reading from books and not screens, and so doing a bit of research about that.
I look forward to reading that. And good luck with this movie that we're not allowed to know about. NDA'd up the yin yang, but
it's a big one. It was so much fun, and I'm dying to talk about it. But you get sent these forms, and
no, you got to take it seriously a little.
Do you? This is Batuta, man. We can't take it any too seriously.
That's it. Well, thank you for joining us today, Tim.
It's been a real pleasure.